At my engagement party, my parents caused a rift when my mom toasted to our daughter, who settled for less than she deserves. My fiancé raised his glass calmly, and to parents who never thought anyone was good enough. The room froze. I smiled sadly, maybe because they don't know what love is. Gasps echoed as I took off my engagement ring and said, "Until they apologize, this party's over." Have you ever had one of those moments where you're standing in a room full of people, smiling, laughing, holding a glass of champagne, and deep down you know, this is the moment everything changes? That was me. A Sunday afternoon in Sonoma, surrounded by people in floral dresses and pastel button-ups, jazz music floating in the background, laughter bubbling like the Prosecco being passed around. It was my engagement party, and it was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I'd been watching my fiancé, Arlo, talk to my best friend Noemi near the bar. He was easy with people like that. Warm, quiet, but steady. The kind of man you could trust to build you a table or rebuild your life. I'd been smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. Everything felt right. Until my mom stood up with a glass in her hand. I knew that look on her face. Smug. Measured. She didn't clink her glass, just raised it slightly and waited for people to notice. Dad looked uncomfortable, like he knew what was coming and couldn't stop it. Which meant I should have known too. But I didn't. "To our daughter," she began, her voice slicing through the chatter like a cayenne through fondant cake, "who's always been so driven, so intelligent, so full of promise." She smiled that tight little smile she used when she was about to say something cruel and pretend it was clever. "And who, despite all her brilliance, has chosen to settle for less than she deserves." Laughter died in throats. I felt the air leave my lungs, like someone had punched me square in the chest. Arlo didn't react right away. He just kept holding his glass, his jaw tightening just slightly. Then, calm as ever, he raised it and said, "And to parents who never thought anyone was good enough." You know that moment when a whole room shifts? Like a collective "oh crap" settles into everyone's bones? That was it. Even the string quartet stopped playing. I felt every pair of eyes on me. Waiting. Watching. Wondering what I'd do. So I stood up. I looked at my mom. My dad. Then around the room. And I smiled, sad and small. "Maybe," I said, "because they don't know what love is." And then I took off the engagement ring. Slow. Deliberate. Set it on the table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Until they apologize, this party's over." You could have heard a pin drop. Or heartbreak. Not sure which. We left in silence. Noemi followed us out, barefoot with her heels dangling from her fingers. "Gemma," she breathed, catching up to me in the gravel lot. "That was... holy crap." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. For what? I didn't even know. For ruining the party? For making people uncomfortable? For finally standing up for myself? "Don't be," she said. "You were a goddamn legend in there." I looked over at Arlo. He was already unlocking the car. Still quiet. Still solid. The drive home was the quiet kind of heavy. Not awkward, just loaded. Like we were both trying to figure out what had just happened. "I didn't expect you to do that," he finally said as we crossed the Bay Bridge. I blinked. "Which part?" He glanced at me. "All of it. You standing up to them. Calling it off." "I didn't call us off," I said quickly. "Just the party. The celebration. I'm not taking that ring off because of you. I'm taking it off because I'm done pretending there's something they're not." He nodded, turning his eyes back to the road. "I know. I didn't expect you to choose me. Not over them." That hurt. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right. I hadn't chosen him over them. Not until that moment. And I think a part of him always wondered if I would. Let me give you some context. I'm Gemma Foster, 34. Marketing manager at a mid-sized firm in Oakland. Not rich, not poor. Grew up in Walnut Creek in a house with a white columned porch and a chandelier in the dining room that my mom polished weekly. My dad, Clive, was a respected heart surgeon. My mom, Denise, ran our lives like she was still teaching English lit to high schoolers. She spoke in metaphors and delivered insults like compliments. I was raised to be perfect. Or at least look at it. Straight A's. Extracurriculars. Piano lessons. Debate club. The Ivy League dream that landed me in marketing because I was too afraid to risk anything unstable, like writing or acting or, God forbid, freelancing. Enter Arlo. He builds furniture. Real, beautiful, handcrafted things. Tables that don't wobble, shelves that carry weight, chairs that curve to your spine. We met at a flea market, both reaching for the same vintage record player. He let me have it. I offered him coffee. Our first date was 2 hours of silence, interrupted by him saying something funny at exactly the right moment. Our second date was 6 hours of talking. On the third, he kissed me and I knew. Not the kind of new that makes your stomach flip like a teenage drama. The kind that settles into your bones and says, you're safe. You're seen. My mom met him 3 months in. She took one look at his flannel shirt and calloused hands and asked, does he do anything else, or is this hobby work? I wanted to crawl under the table. He smiled, told her about his business, his client list, his showroom. She sipped her wine and said, interesting. That was the beginning of the end. In the days after the party, I got a dozen voicemails. My dad apologizing. My mom demanding an explanation. My Aunt Sheila crying. My cousin Miriam asked if we were still doing the cake tasting next week. I didn't reply to any of them. Arlo stayed quiet, gave me space. I caught him once, sitting on the porch, whittling something from a block of cherry wood. He didn't even look up when I sat next to him. She's never going to say she's sorry, I said. He kept carving. I know. I watched the curls of wood fall onto the deck. She'll tell everyone I embarrassed her. That I was emotional. That I ruined the party. Let her. I turned to him. How are you so calm? He finally looked at me. Because none of that matters. Not really. What matters is what we do next. I didn't have an answer. A few days later, there was a knock on our door. Not loud. Not urgent. I opened it and found my dad standing there with a bouquet of tulips and a paper bag of something that smelled like bagels. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. Wordlessly. My heart thudded in my chest. He looked older than I remembered. His hair is thinner. Shoulders more stooped. I'm not here to fix everything, he said, sitting at the kitchen table like he had 100 times before. I know I can't. Then why are you here? To tell you I'm sorry. I should have stopped her. At the party. Before that. Years ago, probably. I didn't. And that's on me. I crossed my arms. She humiliated me. She insulted Arlo. And she didn't even blink. He nodded. She thinks she's protecting you. I laughed bitterly. From what? A man who actually loves me. From making the same mistake she did. That stopped me cold. What mistake? He hesitated. There was someone before me. Someone she loved. Her parents didn't approve. She walked away. Spent the next 4 decades pretending that was fine. That she was fine. Are you saying she doesn't love you? I whispered. I'm saying she lived her life trying to make sure you never choose love over security. Because she did. And she regrets it. I didn't know what to say. I can't speak for her, he said, standing slowly. But I'm proud of you. For standing up. For choosing real. He left the bag of bagels on the table and walked out. I sat there for a long time. The bagels went stale on the counter. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. I'd open the paper bag some mornings, stare at the plain ones he always bought because no one likes poppy seeds sticking to their teeth, and then roll the top closed again. Like I was waiting for something. I didn't know what. A sign? A resolution? A miracle? Instead, I got silence. From her. Not a single call. Not a message. Not a knock on the door. It was like she'd vanished, and I'd started to realize that maybe she thought I had. Or maybe that's what she wanted. Arlo and I didn't talk about it much. After a while, it just became this thing hanging between us. Not a wall, exactly. More like fog. Something that blurred the edges of what should have been clear. I still wore the engagement ring sometimes. In private. It wasn't about second-guessing. I knew I loved him. I knew I wanted to be with him. But that ring felt like it came with too many ghosts attached. The wedding was supposed to be in October. It was June. We hadn't sent invitations yet, thank God. But deposits had been made. Schedules were locked. Noemi had already bought her dress. You don't have to cancel, she said one night, glass of wine in hand, sitting cross-legged on our couch. You can still do it without them. Do it your way. I rubbed my temples. I don't even know what our way is anymore. What do you mean? I mean, I don't know if I'm building a life or escaping one. She stared at me for a second, then took a long sip of her Cabernet. You can do both, you know. I let out a breath and leaned back into the couch. I thought once I got engaged, the rest would just make sense. Fall into place. And instead, it all fell apart. 3 weeks later, I found Arlo in the garage again. He was building something new. Something big. Looked like a dining table. He didn't hear me at first. He was in his zone. Headphones on, sawdust in his hair, sweat dripping down his neck. I stood there for a moment, watching him work, feeling something in my chest crack open. Not because I doubted him. Because I didn't. And that terrified me. When he finally saw me, he smiled, lifted his goggles, and said, "Hey, babe. What's this one for?" I asked, nodding toward the table. He shrugged. Had extra walnuts lying around. Figured I'd make something beautiful out of it. I bit my lip. You always do. He wiped his hands on a rag and came over. You okay? I hesitated. Can we talk? He led me to the edge of the workbench and pulled me into a seat. I don't know how to move forward without looking over my shoulder, I said quietly. He nodded, waited. I feel like I'm constantly bracing for her voice in my head. Like, every decision comes with an echo of her disappointment. Jem, he said, voice low and sure, you don't owe her your peace. I blinked. Then what do I owe? He paused. Nothing. But if you're still trying to make her proud, even now, maybe that's what's holding you back. I sat with that. The truth of it is heavy and cutting. I don't want her at the wedding, I said finally. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Okay. I don't want her in the photos. I don't want her on the guest list. Not unless she walks in here, looks me in the eye and says, I was wrong. And even then, I don't know. He nodded again. Not pushing. Just listening. Okay, he said again. So we move forward. With or without her. I exhaled. It felt like the first breath I'd taken in months. Noemi and I went to see the venue the following week. A small vineyard in Napa. Nothing too flashy. There was a breeze that made the lavender plants ripple like waves, and when I stood under the arbor where we were supposed to say our vows, I felt something shift inside me. It's still beautiful, I said. She looked at me a little surprised. You sure? No, I said. But I think I'm ready to be. Later that night, I got a message. Not from my mother. From her sister, Aunt Valerie. Hey, I heard what happened at the party. I'm not picking sides, but I think you should know something. It was late, but I called her anyway. She answered on the second ring. Hi, honey, she said, voice thick with something, regret maybe. You holding up? Trying to, I said. You said you had something I should know? There was a long pause on the other end. It's about your mom, she said. Of course it was. Does she ever tell you about a guy named Raymond? No, she wouldn't have, Valerie sighed. He was the one. Before your dad. They were planning to move to Oregon. Open a little bookstore or something ridiculous like that. She was mad about him. I mean, really in love. What happened? Her parents didn't approve. He was Arlo, basically. Worked with his hands. Didn't come from money. They told her she'd be cut off. She folded. Married your dad a year later. Never talked about Raymond again. I felt my mouth go dry. Why are you telling me this? Because she's not mad at you, she said gently. She's scared for you. That you're making the same choice she did, but with no safety net. I laughed bitterly. But I am making the same choice. Only difference is, I'm not ashamed of it. There was another pause. Then maybe you're doing it better than she ever could. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the dark for a long time. Arlo was asleep when I climbed into bed. He stirred slightly, rolled toward me, eyes barely open. Everything okay? He mumbled. Yeah, I whispered. Just thinking. He reached out, found my hand, and squeezed it. That was all I needed. We didn't cancel the wedding. But we didn't send the invites either. Not yet. Somewhere in me, I was still waiting. Not for her approval, but maybe. For closure. For the conversation that hadn't happened. The one where she says she's sorry. The one where I say I love him anyway. 2 days before what would have been our RSVP deadline, I got a phone call from an unknown number. Normally, I let those go to voicemail, but something about it, maybe intuition, maybe dread, made me answer. Hello. There was a pause. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in over a month. It's me. I froze in the doorway of the laundry room, holding a basket of unfolded towels. My fingers clenched around the cotton. Hi, Mom. I wasn't going to call, she said, her voice tight. Controlled. I thought, maybe you needed space. I did, I said flatly. I've been thinking a lot, she continued, as if she hadn't heard me. About the party. About what I said. About how things looked. Is that what you're calling about? I asked. How did things look? There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. Gemma, you know I didn't mean it the way it sounded. No, Mom, I said. I think you meant exactly what you said. A sharp inhale. You don't need to be cruel. I laughed once bitterly. Cruel? You stood up at my engagement party and told a room full of people that I was settling. You embarrassed Arlo. You humiliated me. And now, a month later, you want to act like it was some kind of misunderstanding. Another pause. Her voice lowered. I was trying to protect you. From what? From a life where you're the one always carrying the weight. Where you give and never get anything back. You've always deserved more than that. You don't even know him, I said quietly. You've never tried. I didn't have to, she snapped. I've seen it before. The quiet ones, the ones with big hands and sad eyes, they reel you in with the idea of simplicity, of peace. And then they drain you. Slowly. With need. With failure. And there it was. The poison she had never been able to spit out before. I closed my eyes, heart pounding. You're not talking about Arlo. I'm talking about men like him. You're talking about Raymond, I said, voice shaking. She went silent. Valerie told me, I continued. About the bookstore. About how you walked away from him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That wasn't your business to know. No, I said. But it explains everything. You don't know what it was like, she said, a tremor beneath her words. To love someone so much it scares you. To know that love couldn't protect you from the world. I do know, I said. Because I love Arlo. And I'm scared. But I'm not going to punish him for that. I'm not going to walk away to make you feel better about what you lost. Gemma, unless you're calling to say you're sorry, I said, steady now. We don't have anything else to talk about. She said nothing. So I hung up. And then I cried. Not for her. For the little girl I used to be. The one who just wanted her mom to clap when she danced in the living room. The one who thought love had to be earned with good grades and quiet compliance. Arlo found me in the bedroom later, lying across the bed in the dark. He didn't ask. He just lay down beside me and wrapped an arm around my waist. She called, I said after a while. He didn't move. And she's not ready, I whispered. Maybe she never will be. He kissed the back of my shoulder. Then we go forward. Without her. But how do I do that? I asked, the pain catching in my throat. How do I let go of the idea of her ever being proud of me? He didn't answer right away. Then softly, maybe you don't. Maybe you just stop needing it. The next day, we finalized the guest list. I crossed out her name with a pen that bled through the paper. Noemi watched me from across the kitchen island. You okay? No, I said. But I will be. We sat in silence for a moment. Jem, she said gently, can I ask you something? Of course. If she walked in here tomorrow and said everything you wanted to hear, apologized, cried, begged, would that actually fix it? I looked down at the list. My handwriting. My life. I don't think so, I said. I think it's too late for that. Noemi nodded slowly. Then you're already doing the right thing. A few nights later, I walked into the garage while Arlo was staining the walnut table. The color was deep, rich, like wet earth. It was beautiful. Who's it for? I asked. He looked up, smiled. Us. I blinked. What? I figured. If we're building a new life, we should have a table that doesn't come from IKEA. I laughed, and it caught me off guard. How good it felt to laugh. I love you, I said. He set the brush down, walked over, and took my hands. I know, he said. I've always known. The following morning, a letter came in the mail. No return address. My mother's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I carried it around for hours, tucked into my purse, sitting next to my tea, abandoned on the passenger seat of my car. When I finally opened it, the letter was short. 3 lines. I don't understand your choice, but I understand that it's yours to make. I hope one day that will be enough. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. Still, it left more questions than answers. And I wasn't sure if it changed anything. We mailed the wedding invitations 2 days later. To 67 people. Not 68. I didn't cry this time. I just sealed the envelope and pressed it closed with steady hands. The wedding came fast. I thought there would be more nerves, more jitters, more last-minute doubts. But it felt calm. Sure. Like we weren't starting something, but continuing something we'd already been living for years. Only now we get to call it what it was. Noemi showed up the night before with a bottle of champagne and a stack of note cards. We're writing vows, she declared, already tipsy. None of that repeat after me, bullcrap. You owe it to Arlo and yourself to speak from the soul. I rolled my eyes, but I wrote. And the words poured out of me like they'd been waiting for this very page. The next day, I stood under that vineyard arbor in a dress that didn't cost thousands, but made me feel like the version of myself I'd always wanted to be. Arlo looked at me like I was art. Not the kind you frame and admire from a distance, but the kind you live with. The kind that changes you. When we said our vows, I saw tears in his eyes. I'd never seen him cry before. It broke something open in me I didn't know I was still holding in. The applause afterward felt like sunlight. Pure, warm, and deserved. My mom wasn't there. My dad was. He stood in the back alone, with his hands clasped in front of him, and when I walked down the aisle with Noemi beside me, he nodded once. Just enough. After the ceremony, he hugged me. He didn't say much, just, I'm proud of you. And that was enough. For him. But not for her. 2 months after the wedding, I invited my parents to dinner. Separately. Dad came, of course. Polite, pleasant. Still trying to bridge a broken river one stone at a time. Mom took longer. She sent an RSVP through my aunt, like we were planning a gala. She arrived 15 minutes late, wearing pearls and perfume that smelled like cold nostalgia. She looked around our modest house with a wrinkle in her nose she tried to hide. I served her Arlo's mushroom risotto. She picked at it like it might bite her back. "Nice place," she said, which we both knew meant the opposite. "Thanks," I said, sipping my wine. Arlo built the dining table. She blinked down at the walnut wood beneath her plate. Silence stretched. Finally, I looked her dead in the eyes. "I'm pregnant." It wasn't planned. But it wasn't unplanned either. Just part of the messy, beautiful life we were building. She didn't smile. She didn't congratulate me. She said, "You think now's the right time?" And just like that, I realized I'd never get what I wanted from her. Not pride. Not joy. Not warmth. But I had something she didn't. Peace. I stood up, lifted my glass, and said calmly, "To the life I chose. One that's full of love, even if you can't recognize it." She stiffened. "And to the family I'm building," I added, "where our children will never wonder if they're good enough." Her eyes narrowed. "That's cruel, Gemma." I smiled softly. "No. It's just honest." She stood. "I see." "No," I said. "You really don't." "But that's okay." She left without finishing her food. Didn't say goodbye. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No ache. No guilt. Just clarity. A few weeks later, I did something I never thought I would. I wrote an op-ed. Not about her, not directly, but about women like her. About generations of expectations passed down like fine china, fragile, valuable, breakable under pressure. About how daughters carry the burden of their mother's regrets. And how the most radical thing we can do is lay it down. I signed it with my full name, Gemma Foster Dunn, and I submitted it to the same glossy local lifestyle magazine my mother had been featured in 3 times. Once for a charity gala. Once for her curated garden. Once as part of a Women of Grace column that painted her as Walnut Creek royalty. They published mine in the fall issue. The cover showed a woman in boots and a flannel, standing next to a handmade crib. Arlo's crib. Our crib. Inside was my essay under the title Unlearning Perfection, Building a New Legacy. It went mildly viral, shared by mothers, daughters, even a few therapists. I got messages, invitations, panel offers. But more than that, I got the thing she had always chased and never truly earned: respect. Not from people wearing pearls and sipping champagne. From women with scars and stories and strength. My mom never brought it up. But a week after the article came out, I got a single card in the mail. Blank inside. Except for 2 words, "I see." Now, when people ask about my wedding, I tell them the truth. That it wasn't perfect. That it wasn't filled with fairy lights and glittering toasts and unconditional love. But it was real. We said our vows under a sky that didn't promise anything except a new day. We danced barefoot under lanterns hung by friends. We ate food made by hand, not by the caterers. We laughed. We cried. We built something with the bricks they threw at us. And when my child is old enough to understand, I'll tell them what it means to choose love over approval. To speak truth over silence. To live with both hands open, not clutching someone else's dream. Because revenge doesn't always have to be fire and fury. Sometimes, the best revenge is peace. It is a joy. Is a life that thrives anyway.